The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. This Monday night, witness the end of an era. John Cena takes center stage for his final appearance ever on Monday Night Raw. One last match, one unforgettable farewell. Come celebrate the legacy of a true WWE legend. Monday Night Raw, November 17th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time, only on Netflix. Be there for the moment everyone will be talking about.
The Lincoln Wishlist sales event is happening now. Here's what's on everyone's wish list. Enjoying holiday jingles with brilliant 3D audio that surrounds you? Check. Watching snow flurries through the panoramic Vista roof? Check. Packing up presents with the spacious Lincoln Splitgate? Check. Everything you want. All standard on the 2025 Lincoln Navigator SUV. Visit your local Lincoln retailer or learn more at Lincoln.com for exceptional offers on 2025 Lincoln vehicles today.
Hello everyone, it's Gav here and welcome to the very first edition of Haway The Podcast's Deep Dive, in which we roll up our sleeves and get stuck right into a topic that's playing on the conscience of the Sunderland fan base. Today, alongside Johnny Hawley, we're going to take a look at the upcoming Africa Cup of Nations tournament taking place in Morocco in December and January, which has of course been weighing heavy on the minds of some Sunderland supporters since the summer transfer window, when a big part of our recruitment drive included signing players that are likely to be taking part. How will it affect Sunderland? Are the people who are worried right to be worried? Or is it all a storm in a teacup? Which games will it impact? Which of our players are we likely to be missing and for how long? And which Premier League games are likely to be impacted? This is Deep Dive. Johnny, welcome to Deep Dive. First off, I know I said in the intro there that this is a new feature in which we're really trying to hone in on a topic over the entirety of an episode. That could possibly give off the impression that I think all of our other episodes are unorganised and unplanned messes, but that's not what we're saying here at all, is it?
No, we're not saying that. We're definitely not admitting that out loud. That would be that would be a silly move. But no, it's good. I think it's nice to have a chance to just sort of sink our teeth into something, because as much, obviously I love all the normal pods as well, but sometimes you do come off them feeling a bit like you've just been hit by a whirlwind, especially when there's 3 or 4 of us on. So yeah, maybe just a chance to slow the pace down a bit.
I think, and it's also a chance for me and you to show that we're not just one-trick ponies who just turn up pissed and chat about Sunderland and do it all off the cuff. We can actually do research, and we can actually come to the table with something that's more than just pure raw emotion all of the time.
Yeah, we've got 2 strings to our bow instead of just one. That's the level we're operating on, mate. We're professional.
Yes, and today we've chosen to chat about the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations. And the reason we picked this topic, one, it's coming up. It's very much in the mind's eye at the minute. As we head into sort of the middle of November, the tournament starts in just over a month, and people are, rightly or wrongly, we're going to get into that, concerned about the potential of what the Africa Cup of Nations could do to Sunderland's season, given, we're faring so well at the minute. Everything's rosy in the garden. Something like this could well disrupt our season, given that we do play 6 games in the period in which the Africa Cup of Nations is undergoing over in Morocco. So, people are worried. Whether they're right to be worried or not, I think we're going to wait till the end of the episode to decide ourselves whether that's the case. But the Cup of Nations is not something that we've really had to worry about ever, is it? I can remember in the early 2000s when we had Asamoah Gyan and Sully Muntari and, of course, Stefan Sessegnon. Yeah, we would lose the odd player here and there, depending on when the tournament was. But this year it's very, very, very different because it's taking place over Christmas, which has never previously happened. The original plan for this edition of AFCON was for it to take part in the summer. But of course, next year is a World Cup year. There have been a number of issues in the Confederation of African Football over recent years in which tournament hosts have changed hands regularly. This edition, for instance, was not meant to have been hosted by Morocco. Originally, it was supposed to be in Guinea, and they had their hosting rights stripped. So, this is a regular thing with the AFCON. It's very, very haphazard and not particularly well planned out. But it just so happens that it's going to impact upon us because there's so much going on. And I think it'd probably be beneficial if at this point we just give people a brief rundown of exactly how things work. So really, the people to blame for this are, of course, FIFA, because they decided to expand the Club World Cup, which has knocked everything out of kilter. And it's meant that this tournament will be taking place over Christmas, as I mentioned before. 24 teams involved. There are 9 different venues for the tournament. Ivory Coast are the defending champions. They won the last edition of this. And as we were sharing notes prior to this, I did notice that you'd noted that Simon Adingra won the Young Player of the Tournament at that tournament as his country went on to win it. In terms of qualifications, I think you have to be very bad not to qualify for this particular tournament. So all the big boys qualify pretty much every time. In terms of big boys and in terms of notable nations that we need to be bothered about, of course, Morocco are the hosts. Of course, Shamsin Talbi plays for Morocco, and there's a chance he get called up. Burkina Faso, they qualified. Of course, Bertrand Traore is a part of that squad, and they finished as runners-up in 2013. So they've came close before, but they've never won it. There's also Cameroon in there, who've won it 5 times previously. Algeria have won 2 editions of AFCON. DR Congo, which is obviously relevant given 2 of our players, Noah Siddiqui and Arthur Masawaku, play for DR Congo. They have won it twice, but haven't won it since 1974 when they were Zaire. Senegal have won it once in 2021. Egypt have won it 7 times by my counting. Most recently 2010, which surprises because just thinking Mo Salah being at the top of his game, he's never won it. But yes, so certainly hasn't won it recently if he has at all. Ivory Coast, they've won the last edition, as I mentioned before, and 2 previous editions. You've got South Africa in there, have won it once. Tunisia have won it once. Nigeria have won it 3 times. Who else have we got? We've got Zambia won it once in 2012. Benin have got to the quarterfinals. I just picked that one out because, of course, Stefan Sessegnon, I can't get him off my mind when I talk about African football. And Mozambique, who've never made it out the group stage, but of course are captained by Ronaldo Mandava, who will be taking part. And I don't think I missed anybody there, Johnny, but correct as if I did. I think I got every Sunderland player in there. Obviously, of course, I mentioned Senegal. I didn't say Habib Diarra because, as we'll get into, he may or may not go. But the tournament itself, like I said, most of it is taking place in the north of Morocco. The host cities are Agadir, Casablanca, Fes, Marrakesh, Rabat and Tangier. And the draw was taken in January by a bunch of names you'll probably be familiar with. Mustafa Hadji, Serge Aurier, Aliou Cissé, who I think played for Birmingham. I would have to look that one up. But yeah, I think he was one of the Senegal players from the 2002 World Cup who ended up in England. And Joseph Yobo, who played for Everton. They, of course, pulled the draw. And the groups are as follows in terms of Sunderland's concerns. Morocco, the host nation, are in with Mali, Zambia and Comoros. We've then got, as I scroll down, Senegal and DR Congo both in the same group in Group D. So if Habib Diarra does go, he'll be playing against his mates from Sunderland, Arthur Masawaku and Noah Siddiqui. Burkina Faso are in a group with Algeria, Equatorial Guinea and Sudan. Ivory Coast, Simon Adingra's nation, are in with Cameroon, Gabon and Ronaldo Mandava's Mozambique. So there are a couple of instances in which Sunderland players will face each other in AFCON. The important dates now, we'll not give that right here, but the important thing to notice is the tournament starts on the 21st with that opening game featuring Morocco and the final ends on the 18th of January. So it's just under a month in total. I mentioned there were 6 fixtures that Sunderland will take part in during the span of the tournament. Those are Brighton away on the 20th of December, which, given the tournament starts the next day, you would imagine that most, if not all, of the players will travel and have been part of squads, but that remains to be seen. I did hear Nick Barnes on the radio yesterday state that the murmurings were some players wanted to stay with Sunderland as long as they possibly could. So that'll remain to be seen. Leeds at home on the 28th of December, Manchester City on New Year's Day, Spurs away on the 4th of Jan, and then Brentford away on the 7th of Jan. Ended off with a home game against Crystal Palace. And Sunderland's return game after that, once the tournament is over and done with, is West Ham away. So lots of info there. I've just battered everyone over the head with it. But Johnny, it's a big old tournament. It features a lot of our players. And of course, that does concern people. So what do you think, first and foremost, about how this might affect Sunderland? Because, as I said, 6 games, it's a lot of football. We're in a good place. What's your gut feeling?
First and foremost, obviously, you're concerned, aren't you? Like, you'd be stupid not to be a little bit concerned about losing so many of your first team players at the same time. But I think there's sort of things can be a drawback in the immediate future and then can turn out to have been a positive thing later down the line. But obviously the first thing on people's minds is the Premier League points. So from that point of view, there's going to be at least some disruption, because as much as we've, I think we've all kind of mentioned it on various pods over the last few weeks, when we've referenced AFCON coming up, well, you look at certain starting 11s and there's only maybe 2 or 3 who actually start in the team at any given time. So you can say that maybe it's not going to be as bad from that point of view, but at the same time, even if they're not starting, they're contributing. Talby at Chelsea, a perfect example. Adingra comes off the bench against Arsenal, so there's still gaps in the squad that we'll have to fill. I think the overriding thing for me is when I look at the actual state of each team, of each national team that our players are going with. Firstly, there's just some variety between the quality of certain squads compared to others. But also, I think, barring maybe Talby at Morocco, I would say at the moment, all of our players who are going look like they're probably, if assuming they're fit and picked, they're going to be playing near enough every game. Maybe Diarra in the Senegal squad's a question mark. Obviously, we'll get onto him in more detail, I'm sure. But, he's been out injured and they've got a really good squad anyway. But, I think that's one of the details about it that I think it's a good and a bad thing, because it means that even while they're away, you'd rather than be playing and staying sharp and getting competitive minutes, I think, wouldn't you, rather than just going and rotting on the bench for, 3 or 4 weeks plus a week's training or whatever. So I think it's probably a good thing, really, because, again, this is assuming we don't have injuries or anything like that come up, but hopefully it means that whenever they come back, they're going to be coming back, hopefully, still match sharp and pretty much ready to just, maybe a day or 2 in the academy of light and then straight back in the team. So, yeah, I'm happier about that than I would be if we were just sending 7 lads to go and, kick the heels for a few weeks and run a couple of orange juices in at half time.
Yes, well, it's something we can't control. I think that's first and foremost. You've the controllable part is signing the players in the first place, right? And that's why I want to take a little bit of a step back. The reason we're even really talking about this and have been talking about this on and off since the summer, I remember doing podcasts over the summer when we were signing players, and this question about the AFCON kept coming up because we weren't just signing 1 or 2 players, we were signing another one and another one. And then we were linked with more players from African nations, and you're going, I think it was Niaf Airguard who used to play for West Ham. We're linked right the way through the summer window. And it was a big negative mark against some of the players, particularly at the back end of the transfer window, that we either linked with or signed, that they could be missing, because we were already sort of consciously thinking, if we not got enough players already from Africa, that it isn't going to harm the squad too much, and then we just keep adding another and another. And that's the bit that really interests me, and I still can't put my finger on it. Maybe we can do that today. But why do you think, as part of our transfer strategy, that didn't seem to bother the club so much. While everyone else was panicking and worrying and still are worrying, they're not mugs. We know that. From a recruitment perspective, this football club has been virtually exemplary in recent years. It's been brilliant. We weren't going into this thinking, oh, bloody hell, have we signed another African player? Jesus Christ. Didn't see that coming. I thought he played for Scotland or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't that. They quite clearly knew that this was coming. This would be an issue potentially, something we'd have to plan for. Have you got any thoughts on why that might have not been such a concern in their eyes?
Yeah, I think even at the time I was thinking this as well. So this, it's not just me with the benefit of hindsight going back and trying to claim I'm some sort of genius. But I think a lot of people as well were saying when the signings were coming in, there's a pretty obvious risk reward that the club seemed to have just happily gone all in on, which is a little bit like if you look at sort of house prices, right? You might have a house where the price is massively down compared to similar ones. You wonder why that is, and then it still gets bought. And it's like, well, every house has got something wrong with it. Every player has got something wrong with them, if you know what I mean, in a transfer market sense, where whether it's age or experience or fitness issues or ability to resettle in another country, the list goes on. There's always going to be something or multiple things about any signing, unless you're literally signing the best players in the world, that is potentially a drawback. And the same with like moving into a house. You might live right next to a railway line. Well, if you're deaf, you don't really care about the noise from the trains, do you? So, you're just not even going to be bothered about it. And I think the club have took that approach and gone, well, established Premier League sides might be less willing to take the gamble on a Noah Siddiqui because they'll go, well, he's going to be away for 6 games in the middle of the season. And why would we need to take that risk when, the last 6 promoted teams have all gone straight down? We don't feel like there's any urgency in the need to take risks on these kind of players. Whereas we've come up and gone, well, we've got to take a risk in some regard because there's no safe way of building your team coming up from the Championship. It's always a massive gamble, no matter what approach you take. And I think they've looked at it and gone, well, this approach, yes, it's going to cause a few headaches in the middle of the season. Yes, there are going to be touch wood, cross fingers and everything, it doesn't happen, but somebody gets a bad injury while they're out there or does an ACL or something. I hope it doesn't, but that is a risk that we're taking because, as you said before, it's out of our control once they're there. There's nothing we can do about it. We can't influence the team selections or what have you. But the club have gone, if that's the risk we've got to take to bring in players that are the level above what we could get otherwise and suit the way we want to play, I think they've just gone, well, it's worth it. Because if you win enough points in the other 32 games, it doesn't really matter about the 6 they're away for. And I think so far, we've been proving that right, haven't we? Because certainly somebody like Siddiqui has been immensely valuable in the first part of this season to us in the way that we play. I think you can make a very solid argument that we wouldn't have 19 points already if we hadn't signed Siddiqui. And now God knows what would have happened, but I think that's the risk they were taking. And as I say, so far it's paying off, and fingers crossed that it's still the case. And we're not sitting here come, the 19th of January looking back on the disastrous AFCON that's derailed the season.
Yeah, the prep games for the tournament appear to be taking place during this international window. So I was just looking there, for instance, Morocco, Chems and Talby's team, they've got a friendly on Friday against Mozambique, Ronaldo Mandava's team. So there's a possibility they could come up against each other, but at least there isn't that lingering over us that they might have to actually go earlier again to take part in friendlies, as would happen if England were playing or whoever in the World Cup in the summer. I know it's slightly different given the timings, but you get what I mean. So at least we don't have that headache. But when you look at the scheduling and you look at who's unavailable, I think we should probably start with Morocco and with Chems and Talby, given they're the hosts. They open the tournament with a game on the 21st of December against Comoros, who I couldn't name a single player who plays for Comoros. I'm sure if I look, there might be one or two, but yeah, obviously that's one that's on the mind. And in Talby's case, and I don't know if this is something you've noted or not, but he doesn't start that often for Morocco. He's He's viewed as an option off the bench. He's still very young, of course. As I'll let you get into some of the players that Morocco have actually got, you can understand perhaps why he's not first choice yet. But in that period since the last international break and this one, he's had an impact in the Chelsea game, for instance. I think he's gained a little bit more trust from Regis Lebris. And I would imagine that'll slip into the conscience of the Morocco manager when it comes to picking his team for the tournament. But that is an interesting factor, isn't it? Because he could go there and he might not actually play that much, but because they have such a good team, there's a very, very real possibility that he could be there quite a while. So that could be something. You're going to lose a player for a long time and he's probably not going to play very much. And we might be looking at it going, but yeah, you might as well just left him with us.
Yeah, he's in a sort of weirdly unlucky situation in a way, because obviously Morocco are the host. So, they qualified just by being hosts. And I'm sure they would have anyway, because they're actually kind of going through a bit of a golden generation sort of period by their sort of their standards. I mean, you look at, they got to the semi-finals of the last World Cup and got knocked out by France, who obviously then got beaten in the final.
They were very, very good as well.
Very good, yeah.
Well, yeah.
And kept a clean sheet against Spain in, on the way to the semi-finals, beating them on penalties. I mean, mixed fortunes in the last few, Cup of Nations. I mean, round of 16 quarterfinals, round of 16 quarterfinals. But they've got such a good team, and I'm sure they'll be full of confidence particularly off the back of that World Cup show. And you mentioned the fact that they've got some very good players. I mean, even just to pick out a couple of names who play in similar areas to Talbi, you've got Bilal El Kanous, who's obviously the team name's just escaped. I think, is it Stuttgart? I'm sure he's on loan in the Bundesliga anyway, and he's scoring goals and assisting goals in the league and in Europe.
Yeah, and is one of the players that I referred to earlier when I didn't name any names, but somebody who was linked with us towards the end of the window, and people were looking at it and going, bloody hell, if we signed him, that's another player that we could have missing.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got him, who's obviously going to be right up there for a spot in that team. You've got Brahim Diaz as well, ex-Man City and Real Madrid. These are pretty top-level players, and particularly, and this is without disrespect, but in a tournament like AFCON, where not each country has the kind of resources to produce these kind of players, or in a lot of cases to keep them playing for their national team instead of declaring for another, because there's a lot of split nationality situations as well. It's almost unlucky for Talbi, because he's just too young to have been able to break through properly and establish himself into this team, whereas if he was even 2 or 3 years older, by this point he may have had his first couple of seasons in the Premier League and started to develop into a bit more of a household name. So yeah, he's just a little too young to start every game in his country's turn hosting the Cup of Nations. But yeah, that is one where, and this is kind of what I was saying before as well, about how it's good that in the main our players are going to be going there to play regular football. He is the one, like you say, that stands out as, for no injury reasons or anything like that, but the one who stands out where he's probably just going to get sort of out competed in the preparation and training by other players, probably for the team. But like I say, that's, yes, you can say that he's not getting on the pitch, so he's not going to get injured and all the rest of it. And I hope he does manage to get some minutes. But like you say, I think that the fact he's not getting in the team, combined with the fact that they're hosts and they've got a very good side, I would be imagining that whether he's playing or not, Talbi's probably going to miss as many games as he could. I think they're probably going to go, if not the full distance, then pretty close. And by my maths, anyone who makes the semi-final stage at least is probably missing all of the Sunderland games that we rattled off. Yeah. With maybe an outside chance of coming back for the Palace game, depending if they go out, immediately in the first semi-final. But yeah, Talbi, I think, is possibly the one where you're a little bit concerned, just because he's not necessarily going to be playing. They're probably going to be there quite late. So yeah, he might be, say, the most undercooked when he comes back, but hopefully it'll not be too long to get back up to speed.
Yeah. And you've got to remember his age. He's 20-year-old. He's only played twice for Morocco. He didn't actually grow up in Morocco. He was brought up in Belgium. So culturally, it's a big thing, going into international football, a dressing room full of players who've got a lot more experience than you do. Players who are, live and breathe Morocco. I'm not to say that Shamsin Talbi doesn't, but he's so young. He's got a lot to learn. I mean, his youth career as an international was all in Belgium. He played for Belgium at under 15s, under 17s and under 18s. So it's all very new to him. They are the host nation. There's going to be massive pressure from their fans on them to win the thing, given they're hosting the tournament. I don't know if you saw, I saw this the other day, Hakim Ziyech, who's of course a Moroccan football legend. I don't even know if he'll be picked for this tournament, but he signed for a team in Morocco and they filled the stadium out to say hello to him, and they had tifos and banners and flares. And I mean, the atmosphere was unbelievable just for a signing announcement. So you can only imagine what the games are going to be like when Morocco are playing in full stadiums in front of their own fans. It's going to be absolutely crazy. So, he's probably viewed as more of one for the future for Morocco, and he might not play so much. That you use the word undercooked. Might just be a good resting period for him. I don't know, and a good learning experience. But he is the one looking at the squad. I'm thinking, I wish he was staying with us, because as we're about to get on to, we're losing quite a lot of our wide options. And if he's not going to play much, you would rather he was with us. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if he even, he might not even get picked. I'm sure he will, but there is an outside chance he won't, given he's not a massively integral part of that squad.
Although you would maybe say that some of his performances where he's had to fill in at wing back for Sunderland could have, if they've sort of made their way onto the radar of the national setup in Morocco, the manager and the coaching staff and stuff, that could tempt them, because he's starting to prove that he's got quite a fair bit of versatility about him as well. And particularly, I think when he shifted to left wing back against Villa at home, when we went down to 10 men, he put a proper shift in that day, and he wasn't just putting the running in, he was still managing to contribute moments at the other end of the pitch. And show a bit of positivity and get up people. So I still think that I would imagine they'll view him as a good squad option still. But I think you're right. Although your point about the atmosphere is a very good one. Let's say Morocco do manage to make it to the semis or to the final, so he's gone for as long as possible. But imagine how much of a benefit we will see in Talbi's development even if he comes off the bench for half an hour in a final or something, a home final, with the whole crowd, the pressure and the atmosphere in an arena like that. Obviously we all bang on about the Stadium of Lights atmosphere, and it is fantastic, but it's not an international tournament final or something like that. So in some ways, these experiences could be the making of these players, but for the immediate term, it's not ideal.
No. Moving on slightly, Mozambique, and I mentioned before, Ronaldo Mandava, the captain of Mozambique, will be away for, we would probably, and I'm imagining you're going to agree with us here, probably just for the group stages, because when you look at their group, it would take a lot for them to get out there. Not to say they won't, but they've got games against Ivory Coast, who of course have won it many times, Gabon and Cameroon. And so it's a tough group for Mozambique and Ronaldo Mandava, and they've never made it out of the group stage. Their squad, looking at it, they've got some players that people may know. I was looking before there. They've got, and I'm going to butcher this name, Jenny Katamo, I think is how you say it. Plays for Sporting Lisbon. And you're smiling. I don't know if you know if I got that right or not, but
I've got no idea whatsoever. I'm just smiling because it's you to say it, not me.
Well, he's probably their most notable player other than Ronaldo. They do have a fella who plays for Dunfermline Athletic, Alphonse Amade, who plays for Dunfermline, just signed for them this season. But otherwise, not too many notable names there. They're, like I said, they're probably going to struggle to get out the group. And I hope for our sake they do, because I think looking at the list of players who are going to be unavailable, Ronaldo's possibly, along with Siddiqui, the most important, because as we're going to get on to, Arthur Maswat, who's also going to be there and also going to be playing in games, and probably going to be going quite far in the tournament, means we don't have a recognised fit left back at the club other than Dennis Serkin, who it might be the making of. And we'll get on to sort of how it all affects Sunderland once we've got through the teams and stuff. But yeah, I would say for our sake, we've got to hope that Ronaldo's not there for particularly long. And when you look at the makeup of their games, the last game would be on the 31st of December. That would potentially mean, should they do as we expect and not get particularly far, that he'll be available for the 3 games, the Spurs and Brentford away games and the Palace game. There's not a chance he'll be playing against Man City on New Year's Day. Although Morocco's not too far away, so stranger things have happened, but I would sincerely doubt he's going to make that Man City game. But yeah, it would mean he's not going to be away for particularly long, which could be good news.
100%, yeah. But the sooner Ronaldo's back, the better, because, as you said, Masuaku, who we'll get on to, is going to be gone. And then behind that, it's been good to see Serkin playing some under-21s football recently, so he'll be in the picture. And we've seen that, Trey Hume can shift across and all the rest of it. But any solution is, to some degree, putting square pegs in round holes, or players that aren't, or certainly haven't been around the first team picture. So it's never ideal for when you have to bring in a replacement, for that replacement to also be either unfamiliar with the job or unfamiliar with the environment and the setup, because as good as Serkin was last season, he's just not been around it enough. And what should this sounds horrible to be talking hopefully about another country's team's chances of losing as many games as possible. But, even if you just look into the recent form of some of these teams that our players are going with, we just spoke about Morocco. They've won every single game they've played since November 2024, and they've only conceded 2 goals in those 10 games. So they're going into this tournament bang up for it. Mozambique, by comparison, this calendar year 2025, played 7, won just 3, drawn 1 and lost 3. And that's a mixture of World Cup qualifiers and something called the COSAFA Cup, which is essentially a mini AFCON only for South African countries. So even in that level of tournament play, they're not doing outstandingly well. So you'd imagine that's not going to translate particularly well into the AFCON proper when that rolls around. So it does, it certainly looks to me like Ronaldo's going to be back early. As you say, no chance of coming back for the City game, unfortunately. But the one thing I do think about Ronaldo, which should hopefully ease people's concerns, is he's pretty clearly one of just the naturally fittest players we've got. You can tell it on the pitch as well by the way that he covers so much ground, and he's, these lung busting runs up and down the line. But even just like, he played through the Club World Cup for a bit, didn't he, with Atletico Madrid, a couple of games, and then comes into Sunderland, so he's late into pre-season, bit of an interrupted sort of start to life at the club. And then the season starts and he's immediately just performing to an incredibly high level. So, he obviously isn't one of these lads who needs more time to adapt when they're, changing environments and stuff like that. So, hopefully that we've got him back as soon as possible. And hopefully he's still at that sort of fitness level where he can just come in and slot straight back into the team, because for me, he's our biggest sort of safe bet for who can we trust to just come back and be as if they never left.
Yeah. Then moving on a bit to DR Congo, 2 players away with DR Congo. We've got Noah Siddiqui and Arthur Masuaku. Masuaku's played a handful of games, obviously, but that was only while Ronaldo was banned. And to be honest, I don't think he was pulling up any trees and people weren't particularly impressed, but still an option. And as you've just mentioned, Noah Siddiqui, who is, irreplaceable in our team, I would say, just a Duracell bunny who never stops, has been outstanding all season, has formed an unbelievable partnership with Granit Xhaka at the heart of that defence. So, to lose him in particular will be a massive blow, I'm sure. DR Congo are an interesting nation, though. When you look at the group they're in, they're alongside Benin, Senegal, and Botswana, and you would ordinarily look at that and go, well, 2 teams qualify out. It'll be Senegal and DR Congo, but they're not without their issues. DR Congo, they've when the players are fit, they've got a good team, but that's kind of the problem, isn't it? Some of those players haven't been able to stay fit. In particular, Yohan Wissa, who's of course a Newcastle United player these days. He actually picked up the injury which has kept him from playing for Newcastle away on international duty with DR Congo. So actually hasn't even kicked the ball for Newcastle yet. But if he's fit, he's a top-level striker. I'm sure he'll be fighting to try and get back for this tournament. And regardless of what percentage of fitness he is, you would imagine they're going to still call him up, given he's their talisman up top. But let's just say Wissa doesn't get himself back fit, or isn't properly fit and doesn't have an impact. Is there an outside chance, or am I just, is this me being half-full Henderson again? Is there an outside chance that DR Congo might not make it out of their group, given Benin are in there, who aren't a massive favourite for the tournament, but have still got players who play in decent leagues? Is there an outside chance, do you think?
There's certainly a chance. And part of the reason there's a chance is, I know most sort of English football fans don't tend to watch a lot of African international football, understandably, but if you do watch AFCON, or you catch bits of it while it's on, you get some mad games and mad results. You see it in every edition. There's always at least one supposedly fancied team who just sort of implodes out of nowhere and has a terrible tournament and either goes out in the groups or one of the early knockout rounds. And you usually have at least 1 or 2 teams who just turn up and just shock a couple of people, even if it's, the level of shock of Mozambique getting out of the group, from what we've just said, sort of thing. So there's always something mad that goes on at AFCON. But even that to one side, DR Congo, they've been very inconsistent over the last few editions of this tournament. 4th place last time, actually knocked out by Adingra's Ivory Coast, funnily enough. But then, the edition before that, they didn't even qualify. So 2 editions of the tournament, they've gone from not getting in to getting to the semis, which I think tells you a lot about the volatility of the actual level of a lot of these teams. And this is not to say that's just an African football thing. You see the same thing in the Euros as well. Italy winning the Euros and not qualifying for a World Cup 2 years later, like that kind of thing happens at international level. But going back to something as well that you said about the players' fitness, I think that is the big concern, isn't it? Wissa, obviously is the big story. But then, like even through the rest of the team, they've got some quality spread out across the pitch. So obviously Siddiqui in midfield, they've got Aaron Wan-Bissaka at right back. They've got Cedric Bakambu, who I think was Villarreal that he was at for a good long while in Spain. I'm not sure if he's still there. And ex-Mag Chancel Mbemba. But there's a mixture of not just fitness, but also some, Bakambu and Mbemba are on the older side, maybe creeping towards the end of their careers. Siddiqui, for as brilliant as he's been for Sunderland, is only, what is he, 21, I think, still, Siddiqui?
Yeah.
So he's still a very inexperienced player as well, regardless of how good we know he actually is. So I think a lot of those factors come together where, because the quality they've got is kind of spread across different positions, you've got Wan-Bissaka, a good right back, you've got Siddiqui in midfield, you've got Bakambu further forward, you've got Mbemba in centre back, Wissa up front if he's fit. Sometimes you need a bit of luck, don't you, building a national team where you just need the right quality players to come through in enough different positions that you can actually get a full 11 out of it. But as I say, Vissa's fitness, the age of some of the players, the past the primes a little bit, the inexperience, I do think it all just comes together it does make me think that you could be right when you say that maybe they're in for a slight disappointment. I mean, whether that's actually going out at the group stage or not, I don't know, but I think I'd be unpleasantly surprised if they get any further than maybe the quarterfinals or something. But having said that, I think for me, Congo are the most unpredictable of our lads' teams that are playing. I think most of the rest of them, you can make a pretty solid guess as to where they're how far they're going to get. Ivory Coast, Senegal, countries like that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, unfortunately, Mozambique, and we'll get on to Burkina Faso, but you're pretty confident where they are in the pecking order. But Congo, I think, they could realistically do anything, and it wouldn't be out of the realms of possibility. So tough one to call, but yeah, I would be slightly more pessimistic on their chances than optimistic.
Yeah, and their final group game is on the 30th of December. So should they go out at the group stage, as we've mentioned, very slim, but outside chance they would make the Spurs game. Those two players. So yeah.
Do you mean the City game?
Sorry, City game.
The news there,
of
yeah.
course.
And
Yes.
you'd think maybe like a slim chance of making the squad rather than making the starting 11 potentially.
Yeah. Right, I think we'll shoot for a quick ad break, and then we'll come back and discuss the rest of our African contingent and what they're up to.
Find the biggest voices in sport on the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Like us, Under the Cosh.
What is Under the Cosh?
It's stories from behind the scenes, from the changing room, and it's raw, unfiltered, unsanitised, and straight from the horse's mouth.
From the good old days. And the new series is out now. Who've we got, John?
Matt Clattenburg,
Yes.
David Bentley, and many, many more.
So search Under the Cosh and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Find the biggest voices in sport on the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Like the Football for Kids podcast with me, Darren Rees, where kids get to learn about their favourite players, teams, trophies and more. The podcast where kids are inspired, educated and motivated through the thing which they love. Search Football for Kids and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
And welcome back to Deep Dive, and we're going to round off with the last few players and then get into some Sunderland stuff. Ivory Coast, Johnny, that's Simon Adingra's nation, of course. They won the last edition of this tournament, as I mentioned before. He won Young Player of the Tournament, Simon Adingra, so clearly very, very important to Ivory Coast. Amad Diallo also plays for Ivory Coast, so there's a bit of Sunderland interest in this one. And going to be, you would imagine, one of the main favourites for the tournament. I mean, I'm just checking the betting odds, and they're actually down as 6 favourites, which surprised me a little bit. They're behind Nigeria, Senegal, Algeria, Egypt, and Morocco in the odds, but that means very little. Of course, they've got good players, as we said. Simon Adingra, though, somebody who hasn't played much for Sunderland since the start of the season. He started in the team, and then he's kind of been in and out, hasn't he? I think he possibly lost a little bit of trust from Regis Lebris after that Man United away game where he didn't cover himself in glory. He was hooked pretty early on in the game to try and shore us up a bit defensively, and he hasn't really found his way back in, although he did play fairly well against Arsenal when he came on. But still an important player. As I mentioned before, we've got a lot of wide players going away for this tournament, so we really could do with him being there and being back, but they're going to be right there till the death, I think, Ivory Coast. They're a good team, and like I said, the one of the tournament favourites for a good reason. I mean, in their group, as I mentioned, they've got Mozambique, they've got Cameroon, they've got Gabon. So Ivory Coast, good side. Simon Adingra, probably, if we're being honest, he's going to be away for pretty much all of that tournament, isn't he?
Yeah, I would think so. The bigger question is probably going to be how much preparation time's he going to have once he's back before the first game he can be involved in, if you know what I mean. Like if you're out in the semi-finals and then, I mean, I haven't fact checked this, but I'm pretty sure the third, fourth place playoffs are usually the day before the final, isn't it?
I think I'll just bring it up. I have actually got this to hand, Johnny. Well done. The third place game is, yes, it is. It's the day before.
Yeah. So then it's, if you get to the semi-finals, then you're definitely missing all the games we listed off at the start. But if you get in the third, fourth place playoff, you've got an extra day to get back. You've got an extra day to, recover, be with the team, be in and around the squad training and all the rest of it. So, and look, one day here and there is not going to make a big difference in the grand scheme of things. But when you're in the Premier League, and obviously kind of every 1% matters in your prep and in your recovery, and particularly, the sort of physical toll it will take on the players who are actually playing, which you would imagine Adingra will be, even if he's not starting every game, you'd think he's going to be sort of the first man off the bench a lot of the time. So you'd imagine he's still going to get a hell of a lot of football while he's there. So that extra day could make a difference. But then having said that, we've mentioned a couple of times, haven't we? Well, you've mentioned he was sort of the young player of the tournament. That boosts your reputation, boosts your profile. It was certainly something that even like in our signing announcement in the summer for Adingra, they would have mentioned the fact that he won that award.
Mm-hmm.
A player like Adingra, for me, might be the biggest candidate for somebody who can come back full of confidence after a slightly shaky start of the season. Like you said, he's not been terrible, but that Old Trafford, performance and then substitution and what have you, it certainly hasn't given him... You'd imagine he's not feeling as confident as even Talby is in a Sunderland shirt right now, just because he's not had the time and the chances to prove it. But if he goes away and he has another good tournament and he's up there in the conversations for the player of the tournament, or if he's, scoring and assisting goals in semis and in finals, because I'm pretty sure he either set up or scored their goal in the last final. I think he set it up. But again, those are just things where if he goes away a little bit, head down a little bit and not feeling like he's firing on all cylinders and he's not had the chances he feels like he maybe deserves, but goes away and stars in this tournament and comes back and all of a sudden he can walk in and think, hang on a minute, actually, yeah, I am good enough. I have got, that ability still there. I can still access me sort of best levels. That'll stand him in much better stead for the second half of the season than if he comes back and they've lost 3 and they've gone out of the group stage. So this could be slightly me just trying to spin the fact that he's almost definitely going to miss the whole lot of the games we have in those periods as a positive. But he's the one where I actually do think he's actually, in terms of his development, he's actually much better served going away to this tournament than he would be staying with us. As much as I do think we will feel the absence, because as you've said, quite a few of the absences are going to be wide players.
Yeah. And of course, he's found himself behind Enzo Lefebvre in the pecking order, so even if he was still here, he probably wouldn't be starting games for us, but still, it's nice to have them options off the bench.
Yeah.
Speaking of wide players, then moving on a little bit, Burkina Faso will, of course, have Bertrand Traoré, I'd imagine, as part of their squad. He's become more and more important, hasn't he? I talk about players losing trust, maybe, from Regis Lebris. He's certainly one who's gained trust, and he's been in the team as an ever-present now for, 5 games? I would have to check. But Bertrand Traoré, obviously very experienced, has proven himself in multiple leagues, scoring goals. Hasn't yet scored one for us, and at times has looked like he's got his shoelaces tied together in front of goal. But he has put some decent performances in, and the important thing is the manager trusts him. The manager's been playing him ahead of Adingra, ahead of Talby from the start of games. And Burkina Faso are a strange nation, aren't they, when it comes to what you can expect from them coming into this tournament. I'm really not sure. I mean, if you look at the betting odds, they're probably about middle of the pack. They're at 83-1 to win it. So nobody's expecting them to win the tournament. But I've got a sneaky feeling they might do okay still. I'm looking at their group and who they've got, and that, they have got a handful of decent players, of which one is Bertrand Traoré. But it could either be the case. This is one of them, Johnny. You'll either be back after the groups, or they could even go as far as the quarters, semis. You wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, there's such a feast and famine team. It's in the African Cup of Nations. The last few, it's round of 16, 4th, didn't qualify, 3rd. So you're either right towards the top end, or you're putting in some really substandard performances. And as you said, they have got a handful of decent players in that squad. But I think, and again, I know this is a very sort of European-centric viewpoint to take on it, but you look at some of the other squads and you've got players who you recognise who've played hundreds of games at the top level in Europe. I mean, again, we'll get to Senegal, but their team in particular is stacked full of talent that has proven it in the top leagues, in the Champions League, the top competitions, and won some of those biggest trophies that all players in the world sort of grow up dreaming of winning. Whereas Burkina Faso are very much not a star-studded squad. Having said that, though, you look at some of their recent form as well, and in their last 6 World Cup qualifiers, they've won 5, and the only one they failed to win was a 0-0 draw with Egypt, who obviously, Mo Salah's team, and as you said near the beginning, the most decorated Cup of Nations team of all time. So they're obviously doing something right, and they have got the ability, I think, to go there and put in a good showing and get towards the latter stages. Whether they've got enough in them to actually go all the way and win the whole thing, I think you said 83-1, didn't you? That feels more realistic to me in terms of the chances of going all the way. But from our point of view, they don't actually need to go all the way to functionally go all the way. They only need to get to the semis to miss the lot. So yeah, they've got that in them. But I would, if you were asking us to make a prediction, which I know you didn't, so I'm doing this to myself. But
just do it anyways. It's fine.
Yeah, I'll do it anyways. I can see him being back by that Spurs game, or maybe if they get to sort of the round of 16 and then go out, maybe he's not quite back in time for that, but could be back, the game after, which is just scrolling up, only 3 days later. But that one game extra at the tournament could make a bit of difference. But I would imagine we'll certainly be seeing Traore back before Palace. Would be my guess.
And you've just kind of put me onto something quite interesting there, that the Tottenham game's a Sunday and then the Brentford game is a Wednesday, both in the capital. So for players coming back, very easy to get flights from Morocco back into London quickly. So I would imagine that the plan would be to stay down in the south. I can't imagine they're going to come back and travel all the way back down a few days later. They might surprise us. I don't know. But there is that possibility, of course. Anybody flying back in can get easily into Heathrow and and meet up with the squad and stuff. I'm sure these are all things the club are planning around. But yeah, it's an interesting one with Burkina Faso. I'm not sure how they're going to do. None of us are, but yeah, strange one. Last but certainly not least, as you mentioned before, Senegal. The Senegal national football team, one which when I was a kid, I always just think back to that team that blew everybody's socks off in the 2002 World Cup, and a whole host of those players ended up playing in England as a result of the performances in that tournament. But over more recent times, Senegal have kind of proven themselves to be a producer of some unbelievable footballers. I mean, he might be older now, but Sadio Mane, of course, their last game in October against Mauritania, he scored twice in that game. You've got Iliman Ndiaye, who of course scored against us for Everton last week. They've got some quality footballers, Senegal. They're not in they're certainly one of the favourites, but the 4th favourite behind Algeria, Egypt, and Morocco for the tournament. But again, Senegal probably are going to be right up there. And you can do the roll call of how they've done recently, but they've always done pretty well in recent years. But the big thing with this one is, will Habib Diarra go? Now, if he's fit and he's playing, yes, absolutely, he will be part of that squad. He's very much a part of that squad, given, before he even signed for Sunderland, of course, he scored against England, didn't he, at Nottingham Forest ground in the summer. He and then got his move to us. He was our record signing, so there's a lot of spotlight there. But he's been missing for so long. And I wonder, will the club be saying to him, look, I know you want to go, but it's in your best interest if you don't. So rather than kind of deep diving on Senegal here, I'm just wondering whether we should probably discuss whether he even goes or not. Because from what we were told, the target is the Newcastle game. Now, if his target is to be back for that match, that's the last match before we're expecting players to head off all over the place. I'm I don't think I've got half a feeling, Johnny. They're not going to want him to go, and I don't think he will. But where's your head at?
I'm pretty close to you, and part of the reason is when you actually look at the makeup of the Senegal national squad at the minute, some of their best players, they've got, again, it's slightly older, but they've got Idrissa Gueye in the middle of midfield.
Yeah.
They've got Sarr, Pap Sarr from Spurs. So those, again, Gueye slightly over the hill a little bit, you can argue, but those are two very, very good options, both in the middle of midfield in the position that Diarra plays. So it would be a very different conversation if it was a situation like Ronaldo at Mozambique, where they've obviously not got somebody anywhere near his level who could come in and do the job he does and, cover for him in the squad. Diarra, you do imagine, is replaceable, feels like a harsh word, but certainly one of the players whose absence would be felt less by their country. And as well, again, and another thing we mentioned about Siddiqui, you do forget how young Diarra still is as well, despite the fact that he was already scoring against England before he even signed for us. And, he played a lot of football it was Strasbourg, wasn't it, in France? And he was captain, wasn't he? I don't know why I'm doubting myself with all this. I know Sunderland. But yeah, he's obviously experienced in football, but he's not, he's not your 27, 28-year-old in their prime top class footballer yet that you hang your hat on in pressurized tournament situations. So I do agree with you. I could easily see a world where even if he is back for the Mags game, you'd have to imagine he's not going to be chucked in from the start. Even just from the looking at the match point of view, I'm not sure if he starts that game. So even if he's involved on the bench, even gets on the pitch, that's not a lot of football to have in your legs going into a big tournament. And yeah, like I say, the other players in the squad they've got in that area, it does make us think that you could be right, and it could be a case where he does just decide, actually, staying at Sunderland, getting myself back to full fitness, and selfishly, from his point of view, he'll be thinking, this is a chance for me to already be able to start making me claim over Siddiqui back in the midfield.
Yeah.
Because we were all talking about the midfield three at the start of the season, but recently it's much more been a conversation about the two of Xhaka and Siddiqui. So it's already harder for him to get into. And he might look at it and think, well, if I'm around for Man City on New Year's Day, if I'm around for Spurs, these are big games as well. And if let's say we got a result against Man City on New Year's Day, that'll be big. That'll be huge. It'd be a huge occasion. So it's always harder to drop players after results like that, isn't it, than it is after a loss, or, even if you win against a relegation rival or something. So yeah, I think there's certainly arguments to be made about whether he'll go.
And then it gets into the realm of politics, doesn't it? Because if he snubs his nation and it's known that he's done that, that could really affect his international prospects. And it might well just be a bit of creativity from Sunderland here and trying to keep him. Look, I'm kind of torn on this. I've got a feeling he'll stay, but if he gets a call up, that'll be so disappointing from our perspective, having waited so long to get him back before he's even really ready to return or properly fully fit, just to have him whipped away. And then he might not even play because he hasn't been playing. They're going to want fit legs in there. It's going to be tough to see him really playing much of a part. Maybe later in the tournament if they progress and he gets a couple of sub appearances. And from our perspective, I can kind of see where that might be beneficial because he's getting games, he's getting minutes in his legs. But you would much rather he be doing that at Sunderland. And we're about to get on to Sunderland in a second. But you kind of raised the point there about Siddiqui. Him going away could well be the chance for Diarra to re-establish himself. And I'm just hoping that's the carrot they're dangling. And I know it's not really the club's place to make him make a choice between represent his country and them, but I just think that the timings and all these other things about his fitness, I just think he might be better served staying with us. And I hope he's on board with that. And hopefully his nation are too.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, just to reinforce the point actually about he's not always even first choices, in the last international break that he was fit for, which would have been the first one of the season, Senegal actually played against DR Congo, and Siddiqui started the game for Congo and came off after 73 minutes. But Diarra for Senegal didn't even start and only came on after an hour. So they only ended up on the pitch together at the same time for about 10 minutes as an overlap. And I think it's telling that it was Siddiqui who was the one who was on for longer and comes off, and Diarra's the one who's coming on towards the end. So yeah, just always, I don't know what it is. I just like when players who play for the same club play against each other at international level. I always like it. Just something about it sort of scratches my brain the right way.
Yeah. Well, we'll have another quick break, Johnny, and then we'll come back and we'll chat about how all this affects Sunderland, who might actually get opportunities and all that other good stuff. So we'll be back after these ads.
Find the biggest voices in sport on the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Like Football Cliches with Adam Hurrey, Charlie Eccleshare and me, David Walker. It's a truly unique podcast all about the language of football, the words, the phrases and all the tiny things you didn't think you cared about until now. Search Football Cliches and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Find the biggest voices in sport on the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Like Big Kick Energy with me, Maisie Adam.
And me, Susie Ruffle.
Each week we bring you the latest from the world of women's football. Whether you're a lifelong fan like me,
or a newer fan like me and have recently got swept up in the Lioness excitement,
we've got everything you need to know about the women's game.
Search Big Kick Energy and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Deep Dive, and like I said before the break, we're going to chat now about Sunderland a little bit more. I know we've kind of skirted around it, but we are going to be missing quite a few players over that month or so. And I'll just remind everybody of the games which are likely to be impacted by AFCON or are certainly taking place during the tournament. Just before the tournament takes place, we take on Newcastle, which is obviously the biggest game of the season, and there's going to be a real play from the football club to keep all of those players really with us until we've played Newcastle, which won't be, I would imagine, it's kind of favourable to the nations they play for. But suck it up, Buttercup. I've got to play the Mags. But yeah, we play Newcastle on the 14th of December, and then after that point, it's kind of all systems go for the AFCON. So we've got Brighton away on the 20th of December. I think the first game of the tournament, if I'm right in thinking this, is the 21st.
That seems right to me. Yeah.
So Morocco play in that first game the day after the Brighton game. So massively unlikely that certainly, Shems and Talby, if he gets a call up, will be anywhere near Sunderland for that game. Now, looking at the scheduling of some of the games, there are 6 groups, and Group F contains the Ivory Coast and Mozambique. So they don't play their first games, by my reckoning, and I might be wrong here, until the 24th of December, which is 4 days after that Brighton game. I wonder, could Simon Adingra and Ronaldo still take part in that Brighton game? Certainly something to keep on your mind. And obviously with the other groups, we've got Group E. The first Group E game is also on the 24th of December. And that group contains Burkina Faso. So there's also a possibility that Bertrand Traoré could play in that Brighton game. Group D contains Senegal and DR Congo. Their first games are the day before. So again, these players could well feature against Brighton. I'm positive the last time the AFCON came around, this sort of thing happened. I'm fairly certain that Onana from Man United played a game and then the next day he was playing for Cameroon or the day after. It was pretty close together. I might be wrong in remembering that.
He did. If I'm remembering it right, I'm pretty sure the extra game he stayed for, he had an absolute howler in as well. Because I'm pretty sure that I know that doesn't narrow it down. Like,
yeah, that kind of just is him, isn't it? But yeah. So point being, it's not a given that all these players are going to miss the Brighton game, which is better, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, and I suppose it's one of them where their national team squads will be looking at it and possibly thinking, weighing up the advantages of having a player come in who's, yes, it's an extra game and it's extra miles in the legs and a bit extra fatigue. But again, like it's another game, keeping them sharper and fresher in terms of match fitness. And with us having had I was going to say a full week. I know it's 6 days because the derby's moved to the Sunday, but it's not like they've come off the back of a 3-game week where they've played, weekend, midweek, weekend. They're coming off the back of a standard weekend schedule. It's kind of the last one before the thick of the Christmas action starts, isn't it? That Brighton game on the 20th is the last one before you're right into the, all the cliches come falling out of people's mouths, the festive period and all the rest of it. So yeah, I could see the logic. I suppose they'll probably be. Look, I can't speak for the thought processes of any of these African managers because I don't know who any of them are. But maybe if it's Mozambique looking at Ronaldo, they might be a little bit more hesitant to allow him to play the extra game because they might be thinking, well, it is an extra chance to get injured and he's our captain and best player by an absolute mile. Do we want to risk it? Whereas somebody like, Diarra we've already touched on, but even somebody like even a Masuaku maybe for Congo, who's maybe not guaranteed to play every single game, they might be a bit more willing to go, well, actually, yeah, you keep him for the extra game, keep him fresh for us. And then, by the time he comes in, we'll integrate him. If he has to miss one game, he misses one game. So it'll be a very individual basis to make each decision, I think. It's not going to be, if any of them do stay, it's not going to be like the all stay or none of them stay. I can easily see a pick and choose sort of situation happening there.
Yeah, the way the club's run now, I would be amazed if they haven't been in long discussions with these countries and the managers about the availability of players and who's allowed to go when. And we're not going to spring it on them and be like, just before the tournament, oh, by the way, you can't have these players. I would imagine they're already prepared for that. And by the way, we won't be the only club who would like to hang on to their players for a little bit longer. I would imagine this is going to be a widespread thing. You're going to find a lot of these, because bang in the middle of the season, it's to be expected, So a lot of these nations are going to be probably expecting not to grab some of these players until a day or two before they even play some of the games. The advantage I would imagine is that with this taking part in the north of Morocco in the main, a lot of the teams will be based either in the north of Morocco. They might not even be based in Morocco. They might be could even be based in Spain. I don't know, just because it's so easy to get between the two nations and what have you. But point being, it's not difficult to get to Morocco from mainland Europe and from the UK. It's North Africa, right? So, it's not like there's loads of travel time involved. Let's say the players I mentioned before, Bertrand Traore, Noah Siddiqui, etc., etc. Let's just say they do take part in that Brighton game. They could be on a plane that night and in Morocco. You know what I mean? It's not going to be a case of they're going to be there days and days later. So at the minute, I'm feeling like the club will have done their prep on this and they'll be making sure they get as many of the players available as possible for these games. I think Shamsden Talbi in particular is going to struggle and probably, if he does get a call up, won't be available for Brighton. But otherwise, I think we might be okay, So let's see, certainly. But as the rest of the tournament plays out, and there are so many variables, we've already kind of given half a hint of what we think might happen. But let's just say every one of these teams do well. Okay, it's not going to happen. Somebody's going to get knocked out in the groups and what have you. But let's just say they do fairly well. The club have got to be prepared for that eventuality. They're actually preparing now, I would imagine. When you see the names of players who are getting minutes in the under-21s team, Luke Onai and Dan Neil, Brian Broby last week, Eliza Mayenda last week, Anthony Patterson last week, all played under 21s football. Dennis Serkin, of course, is on the comeback trail and played 2 games in the last week or so for the under 21s. The club are getting ready. They're getting players fit and available and minutes into the legs. And I would imagine over the next month or so, we're going to see a lot more of these players off the bench. We might even see the odd one in the first team. Obviously, there's the looming prospect of Noah Siddiqui and Granit Xhaka getting suspensions. So, it's very likely they're going to pick up that 5th yellow card. Praying it's before we play Newcastle, because if it is, then, it means they're available for that game. But that's going to provide opportunities to Dan Neil. It's going to provide opportunities to Chris Rigg, to Enzo Lefebvre perhaps in the middle. Lucherel Getreuder, who we know is versatile and can play holding midfield. It's an opportunity perhaps for him to play in there. So these things are going to be coming up over the next few weeks, aren't they, for Sunderland, as the lead up to the AFCON is apparent. Where do you kind of see the lay of the land? Where do you see what Regis Labrise, as we know, is so thorough, isn't he? So I just don't see any prospect of this being kind of haphazard and half-baked.
No chance. I don't think Labrise is capable of doing anything half-baked. Like, something inside him would just physically prevent him from, you know what I mean? He's the type of bloke you can imagine, like, when you're at school or whatever, you'd have like a test that doesn't matter for anything. Labrise would have not had it in him to, like, not revise all night for a week in the lead up sort of thing. He's not going to leave any stone unturned for anything, any variable, no matter how small, no matter how inconsequential it would seem. And these are pretty consequential variables of having some big players missing. So you're right. These discussions will have been happening internally at the club weeks ago, before now. And we're still weeks away from the tournament as we sit here. So I've got no doubt that they've been planning things like making sure Dennis Serkin's recovery as much as possible coincides with when we need him back to cover these players going away. Things like, as you've pointed out, the minutes that players are given in the 21s, that's obviously going to have been, to some degree, plotted out ahead of time to work out who needs the minutes, who needs to keep ticking over, because, all players are different. Some players kind of need to be playing regular, even if not actually competitive in the senior sense, but sort of competitive football as in a match environment. Some players are happy to just tick over with a bit of training. All that sort of stuff will be taken into account. For me, though, the 2 biggest things, one of which is obviously slightly premature, is what do we do in January? Because with how quickly we acted and how decisive we were in the summer, you've got to think that part of that planning would have involved, as we said before, they've kind of weighed up the risk reward of bringing in so many African players who are going to be missing. Inherent in that calculation is, well, we'll have to make sure that we're on it in January if we need to be, early doors, to bring a couple of bodies in, just because, let's say you bring 1 or 2 people in really early, like I'm talking 1st of January or the immediate days, couple of days afterwards, that unlocks the possibility of them playing against, Spurs on the 4th of January if they're in early enough,
or Manchester City.
Well, depending on the level.
We're not, I'm not putting too much credence into this, but you see the rumours about a certain Barcelona player, and things like that. If you're making deals like that, you're going to be doing them now. You're not going to be waiting until January 1st. So there is a strong possibility we might even announce a signing or 2 and say, it's good. Yeah, or they're going to be available for selection from January 1st. You wouldn't rule that out. You know what I mean? Like, when I talk about them being thorough, they did it in the summer. In the summer, we understood the importance of getting big names in early, and we did it. And like, if we're going to do it again in January, I think it will be literally first couple of days of Jan.
And absolutely nothing that we've seen or heard from the club over the course of this season has suggested their approach has changed in any way. So why would we expect them to behave differently in January than they did in the summer? They've made it clear in all the ways they can, barring a club statement, that there's going to be money to spend. So, like you say, that obviously this is going to be going on behind the scenes. So that's the big unknown. If we could make 1 or 2 deals to bring some first team quality players in early in the window, that alleviates your concerns a bit immediately. But parking that to one side, the stuff that we can sort of be a bit more confident about is, the internal things at the club with the players we have right now. The biggest factor for me is what happens with the defence. Because what we do with the defence, I think, totally transforms what you can do going forward further up the pitch. So, case in point, Dennis Serkin. Is he going to be fit enough to come back, first of all? That's obviously a concern. If he is he trusted enough to be put in from the start? Ronaldo goes away, Masuaku goes away. Does Lebris trust Serkin to just slot him straight in the immediate first game after that? Whether that's Brighton and they've already gone by then, or whether they go after Brighton and it's the Leeds game. I mean, especially if it's the Leeds game, actually, because that's going to be a pressurised game. Leeds are going to see that as one of their big opportunities to pick up points away from home. And, they're a promoted side. Same as us, you need as many points as you can get. And will be expected to win that game, or certainly will be the favourites. So is Serkin trusted to go straight in? If he is, I think that unlocks a lot more things that we can do with the shape of the team, with the makeup of the team, in terms of who we shuffle around. Because if Serkin can come in at left back, you don't have to shift Trey Hume. You don't have to cover for Trey Hume at right back. So then you open up the possibility of sticking with a back five if we want to, because you could have Serkin on the left, you could have Trey Hume on the right, and then you can still have three out of Alderete, Ballard, Mukele, and Geertruida as centre backs, and then that leaves the option of Geertruida or somebody else, but Geertruida's the obvious one to be pushed forward into midfield, because as we've said multiple times, Siddiqui's the biggest obvious gap to fill in the team, both because he's class and because he's quite unique in what he's got to offer, because he's so physically gifted as well as being a good technical player. You're not going to, outside of Habib Diarra, you're not going to just slot somebody else in and it be a one-to-one sort of thing. So, as I say, if Serkin can play a left back, you've got loads of options. You can have, your standard back four, you can have your back five, and you can choose who plays where. Obviously, Mukele, we know, can play multiple roles. So can Geertruida. You've got a lot of scope there to start tinkering. And as I say, pushing people forward into midfield to cover for some of those gaps. If he's not trusted or if he's not fit, then we start to look a little bit more restricted, I think, because then it's probably Trey Hume to left back, you'd imagine, because we've already seen that this season. And that means that that almost precludes you from playing a back five before anything else, because I don't know if we've got anyone who can do the same sort of role Hume does at right wing back, where he does that hybrid role where he's popping into midfield and coming back into the five. So we'd still have options at right back, but I think it would probably hamstring us into playing a four, sort of only a four. Whereas obviously at the minute, one of our big strengths is we do seem to be able to just switch back and forth without too much trouble, even mid-game. So yeah, it clips our wings a bit in that sense. And then obviously the knock-on effect going forward is if Mukele has to play right back, that means that you're limited to probably Alderete and Ballard at centre-back. If you chuck and Geertruida into midfield as well on top of that, I know we've got Luke O'Nien and he's going to have to be involved probably to some degree, but leaving him as the sole backup centre-back for that period feels to me like a risky move.
Well, your mind kind of wanders then to the players we would potentially sign if we did strike early in January, and I'm thinking wingers and possibly a central midfield player. So let's say, because it's unreasonable to expect Siddiqui, Xhaka in particular to be able to do what they do every game and not have some quality backup. And that's not to say we don't. Obviously, Diarra is going to come back into the reckoning. I think Geertruida can probably play there. But then there is a drop-off in quality, and I don't mean to be disparaging towards Dan Neil and Chris Rigg in particular. But there is a big difference between Granit Xhaka, Noah Siddiqui, and then pretty much everybody else. So it does make you wonder, in terms of midfield experience, are we going to go out and grab someone in the transfer window who's a little bit older, got that experience across Europe, not quite as old as Xhaka, of course, but somebody in their late 20s, 27, 28-year-old, who's got a lot of experience, who might have even played in the Premier League before, because there's not an awful lot of Premier League experience outside of Xhaka in that midfield to get through to the end of the season. Because as we know, the club are already making it clear they're ambitious and they want to finish in the top 10. And to be honest, I think if they're being brutally honest, I think they think we can finish with a good January window and the trajectory of results carrying as they are. I think they think we can finish in a European place, and that's maybe why we're hearing noises about certain players and things like that. So it wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility we go out right at the start of January and sign someone for 25 million who's ready to just play games in that midfield. And that will change an awful lot when it comes to working out how this team shape works out. Particularly if they've already played the Premier League. Because if you've already played 100 games in the Premier League, let's say, and to a good standard, you're not going to think twice when you chuck it in for a game, against Tottenham or whatever. You're just kind of used to it. And on top of that, the wide options, no real experience outside of Traore in them positions. And we already know that they were dead set on signing Armand Loriente, who was a left-sided wide player. Now, I know Talby's role's changing, but still, I do think we could do with if we're pushing for Europe, there's no harm in sitting here and saying we can do better in nearly every position. So, my mind does wander to that January transfer window and whether we go out early and get a winger and a centre mid in, not just to help our kind of push towards the end of the season, but to relieve some of the strain around the festive period. Because when you look at the run of fixtures, and one we haven't actually discussed yet, but there is sandwiched in amongst that, there is a FA Cup game, right, between Brentford and Palace, which we'll be playing in. So there's technically 7 games, 6 in the Premier League, and that's our main focus. But there is going to be a game between Brentford and Palace. That's probably ideal for getting new players integrated quickly, get them in a competitive game. But it's quite a full-on kind of week and a half, 2 weeks from Leeds onwards. You've got Leeds, Man City, Tottenham, Brentford, and then an FA Cup game all in the space of like a fortnight, pretty much. That's a lot of football. That's a lot to ask of Granit Xhaka and a lot to ask of whoever comes in that midfield. I know we keep saying this about Dan Neil. We keep saying this about Rig. They do need minutes, but are they at that level yet where you can expect them to play Manchester City, Tottenham away, then Brentford away, which is going to be a tough game, then it's asking a lot. If I was going to hang my hat on anything and put money on it, it would be Sunderland going out and buying a centre mid right at the start of January who's ready to play games.
Central midfield's a big one because I completely agree with basically every word you just said. And the ethos, I'm sure, will be behind the scenes, will be the club will be thinking we want to fix problems before they appear. So you talked about the middle of midfield, and the reason I think it is the biggest problem is because how many times have Sunderland fans over the last few weeks probably said, God, I hope Xhaka doesn't get injured. The whole conversation about whether he gets his suspension before the Mags game is because we all know how vital he is to the team for these kind of games. And you're right. You look at Dan Neil and Chris Rigg as the two in particular who are probably the next two in the pecking order behind the starting players at the minute. I don't think it's even a question of do you trust them in these games. It's more, trust feels like a harsh word to use, but just sticking with it for a sec, it's more, do you trust them without somebody behind them on the bench who you can turn to if it goes wrong? So if the equation is Xhaka's overworked, let's give him a rest and he's on the bench and we start Dan Neil. And then if it's going tits up, we can always call Xhaka on off the bench and then you can, you've got an option you can turn to. If Xhaka's suspended or injured and it's Dan Neil playing and you look around on the bench and it's, I don't know, Harrison Jones at Man City, at Tottenham, at Brentford, these kind of games, that's not the kind of pressure you want to heap on a young player like a Harrison Jones or anyone from the 21s or 18s, really.
And these aren't free hits, by the way. If we are really going for a top 8 finish,
you need to take points from some of them.
Of course you do. Yeah. So you would be looking at Leeds at home, which obviously is before the transfer window opens, so there's not much we can do about that. But Leeds at home, right now, I'm looking at that and saying we've got to win that game. We're better than Leeds. we're fantastic at home. So that should be 3 points. I'm not going to sit and predict all the points, but you get me drift here. You look at it, Brentford and Palace are probably games we should be going to and thinking we can get 3 points. Tottenham, depending on what state they're in at that point, could be a game we're kind of looking at and we're going, well, we're well ahead of them in the table.
Particularly the fact that Tottenham's home record is actually abysmal. It's their away form, which is excellent, and we play them at their place.
Yeah, a lot can change in sort of 2 months, but the manager's not flavour of the month either, is he? So the point kind of being, we can't just look at these games as free hits, and the club won't. They won't be looking at this and going, well, it's a chance to give Luke O'Nien and Dan Neil and Chris Rigg a game. They'll be going, oh, it has to be business as usual. We can't feel the impact of these players leaving. We have to get results.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's the fact that now at the stage we're at, it has to be business as usual because, and we've all kind of said this, I'm sure, again, in the last couple of months, like, wow, bloody hell, I'd have ripped your arm off for this start. You know, when the goal at the start of the season was by hook or by crook, get 40 points and stay in this league, you'd look at 19 from 11 and go, bloody hell, look how many points we can drop from there to the end of the season and still be fine. You know, all those things about, like, if we kept getting points at Derby's, points per game record from here, we'd have stayed up last season and all that kind of stuff. Brilliant to have that much breathing room, but the focus has shifted now. The aim, obviously, the stated aim is still 40 points, and 40 points is still, if we had a catastrophe and we scraped 17th and stayed up by the skin of our teeth, it's still a satisfactory season overall. But where we are now, you're right, it all has to be, it can't be, well, we can get away with chucking a midfield in with Neil and Rigg in against Man City, because it doesn't matter if we lose that game, and we don't have to worry, everyone's back a couple of days later. You're completely right. It will now be, I'm 100% sure, internally in that dressing room, they're looking around each other. They're probably not even talking about AFCON. You know what I mean? They're probably that focused. They're just going, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's available, what the tactics are on the day. It doesn't matter what the opposition do. They'll go into every game thinking they can win. So from that mentality and perspective, it does become this much more, not urgent conundrum, but it becomes a much more immediate requirement to be able to find those solutions and sort the team out, which I think then also leads into your point about the January window. I do agree, because they've shown that they're quite flexible with their plans, in the sense that they'll just plan for wherever, like, any eventuality, and then as you get close at the time, you're like, right, we know where we're going to roughly be, so we activate this plan, sort of thing, in terms of targets and players. So I'm sure they'll have looked at it and gone, actually, after the start we've had, we do want to keep this going. We don't want to lose the momentum. So then that could lead to the slight smash the glass in case of emergency transfers for January, where it's, well, maybe we didn't want to have to chuck X amount of money away in the first week of the window, but we needed it and the players were available.
Yeah, well, even if you do look at those two, I'm thinking particularly about City and Spurs, right? They're going to be difficult games. But if you look kind of beyond that at Brentford, then the FA Cup game, then the Palace game, I think they're definitely games that we want to be prepared for, in the same way that we were in the summer for the opening fixtures. We saw the fixture list and went, right, the squad has to be ready. We can't be going into the last week of August needing important players. I kind of get the same feeling about this. I think if we're going to do business, it's going to be early in the window, and you'll learn a lot from that first week. If we don't sign anyone, I'm probably going to be looking at it and thinking, well, how ambitious are we actually being here? But all the indications we've got right now are that they're going to be. And two players we haven't really mentioned, which I think are probably worth talking about very quickly. Romain Mundle's, of course, coming back at some point. He's a player who, for me, when he's fit, and that's the important bit here, but when he's fit, is a potential Premier League wide player, because he's got pace, he's got strength. For a winger, he's actually quite a big lad. Scores goals, gets assists, can go off his left and his right foot. If you get Romain Mundle fit, then all of a sudden those worries about wingers ease slightly, particularly on the left, because I'm thinking, we might have to utilise Lafay through the middle, potentially. That would free him up to do that if you can get Romain Mundle available. And Eliza Mayenda, one of the most important players from the end of last season in terms of getting promoted. I talked about a loss of trust earlier from Adingra. I think that miss against West Ham has felt pivotal for Mayenda. He's not been on the pitch as much since then. Isidore's quite clearly the favourite, and then Brobby's now the second choice striker. But it doesn't mean that Mayenda's long-term prospects are hampered at all. I think they could well have a very diligent plan for Mayenda in this period. And I think, again, talking about wide options and forward options, he's going to get his chance, isn't he? And I actually think a bit less than probably Dan Neil, and I keep picking on poor Dan Neil and Luke O'Nien here, but it's because they haven't played much. I think where I'm a little bit more sceptical about their ability to impact games, I think Mayenda and Mundle will have that ability, and I'm a bit more confident in them when we've not got a Dingra, when we haven't got a Traore, when we haven't got Talby. I'm a bit more confident in their ability to just fill those gaps and show quality in the Premier League.
Yeah, and I'm much more relaxed about the forward situation than I am about the back line and what that means for the midfield, which obviously we just talked about. But the front line, I think it's easier to still impact games with a makeshift front line. And makeshift's a slightly derogatory word. I don't mean that these players aren't good, but what I mean by that is, like, if you're a Mundle, right, and you come back in after so long out and the injuries and all the rest of it, he will naturally have a bit less scrutiny on his performances because you've got that, not excuse, but you've got that fact that he's just back from injury, so naturally he needs a bit of time to settle. Mayenda, if he plays out on the right, he's a bit out of position, so there's a bit less of the immediate pressure in terms of expectation of performance because there'd be mitigating circumstances around sort of any selections we make because we all know that the main men are away at AFCON. So you've got a little bit of that pressure taken off. And also, if you're Mundle, you come back. And as you've said, the biggest attribute that you identified, I think, is he can go both ways. He can go left and right. Because I think that is a prerequisite to being a winger in the modern Premier League. You know, like somebody like Jack Clarke when he first came to Sunderland, he could only go one side. And that just totally neutered him, even in League One and the Championship. It wasn't until he added being able to go both ways to his game that we saw him start to step up and provide top-end Championship numbers and obviously get the move. Mundle had that from day one, really, at Sunderland. So I think that lends him to being a threat. And it means that he can probably play on either wing reasonably comfortably. He's better off the left, but you could stick him on the right. But then on top of all of that, if he comes back in and his first game he starts and he does absolutely nothing for 89 minutes, but he pops up with a goal and we win 1-0, or he rescues a point, like, job done and everyone's happy. So you can make do to a degree a little bit easier in the way that we play, make and do up front than you can at the back, because we've spoken all season about how important the defensive solidity and organisation is in our team. So if you're doing things like shifting Trey Hume across the left back, yes, he's still Trey Hume, so he's a quality player. The impact that has, though, on our system and the way that we play, it can be an oversized impact, if you know what I mean. Whereas going forward in attack, I do think because we're much less of a regimented unit going forward, you can afford to have that unpredictability of players coming back and maybe playing in slightly different positions. And not to mention as well, Mundle, obviously fitness, big question mark, but that aside, even if he's not fit, Isidore, Mayenda and Brobby could theoretically play as a front three. You know, you can have Isidore off the left, Mayenda off the right, Brobby through the middle. I know that doesn't leave you anything in reserve other than looking at players like young Finn, the Armenian lad, or, you know, such starlets from the academy. That one was for you, and. You know, it doesn't leave you much in behind, but there are ways and means of making the team. Whereas, as I say, for me, it's the back that's the concern, because that's where the questions are more difficult to answer. Whereas I think up front, as you say, Mundle, Mayenda, there's also the Lefebvre, if he doesn't have to play through the middle, he can play on the left. There's already options there. It's obviously you want better options, but you always want better options everywhere unless you're, you know, Pep's Barcelona team.
Yes. Well, before we give our conclusions here, Johnny, I thought it might be nice just to ask the Rotor Report Twitter followers their views on AFCON. I put the question out there. I said, give us your thoughts on the upcoming Africa Cup of Nations tournament. Are you worried or not? about the effect it will have on Sunderland. Lots of replies, so thank you to everybody who got in touch. Michael Potts, he says, given the head start we've bought ourselves, I'm weirdly and optimistically excited to see some of the fringe players in the old guard given a chance. Would love to see someone like Dan Neil, Dennis Serkin step up and give the AFCON lads a challenge to earn their place back. I completely agree with that. I think, ultimately, one of the big things that you can say about the recruitment that we've had over the summer, it's massively increased the competition, but it's also brought a lot of the players from last season up to the standard of the rest of the team. You look at Dan Ballard and the fact that he's just earning rave reviews, couldn't even get into our team like last season until right at the end of it. So that, somebody could be made a potential star. Ian Crow, he says he thinks Siddiqui will be the biggest loss and the wingers, but the defence only misses Ronaldo, and to be honest, we can manage. And compared to before the season started, the pressure it could have had has been taken away by our great start. Also, they won't all go deep into the tournament, so no, not really. Steve at Steve 2013, he says he's not worried. I think we have enough cover in defence. We are already having to deal with Tiara's absence. Siddiqui will be the big miss. Aiden 112, he says, not at all, to be honest. I hope that Mundell and Serkin will get some game time. Ethan has said, and this is something we haven't really talked about, but he's hoping that players don't come back injured, which is something I was going to bring up. But that is something, Johnny, isn't it? We haven't really talked about. Do you know what the quality of the pitches are like in Morocco? I have watched previous iterations of the African Cup of Nations and just cringed inside at the state of the pitches. But we'll just have to hope that the pitches are decent in Morocco and that the lads are well looked after when they're out there. But yes, that's obviously something we can't do anything about, but is a concern, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the ever-present concern of international football, isn't it? You just want to see players come back fit. You don't want them to go in the first place, but you just want to see them come back with no crutches, no casts, no slings, not going in for any MRI scans or out like that. The other thing, not just pitches as well, facilities in general, in a delicate way, some of the African FAs are not the most above board with everything they do. So I think it's Nigeria players have been put up in a motel instead of a hotel.
I'm sure I read, now you've mentioned that Nigeria, it might have been Trosty Kong who played for Watford. I might be completely slandering the lad here, but fairly sure I read something about him saying that they were like ordering McDonald's in for pre-match meals and things like that. It was just a right mess.
Yeah. The kind of thing that Roy Keane was furious about in Saipan all those years ago, but that's another thing that, again, you can't control it, but it's a big difference going from a Premier League standard training academy, match day pit, all the facilities, hotels, the coaches are more luxurious than some private jets, you know what I mean, these days with all the amenities and stuff. Going from that to the facilities that they could be in. So fingers crossed it's none of our lads as FAs who've decided to skimp on the, on the accommodation and on the food. But something that you hope doesn't come back to bite us.
Yeah. Border Riva has said something which I completely disagree with. It goes against something which I said before. Has said, we've got one must-win game in that window, which is Leeds at home. Otherwise, I think we have a free hit at these fixtures. Brighton, Spurs and Brentford away plus City at home. Not sure I agree with that necessarily. I don't think there are any free hits when you fly, and I think you need to keep that momentum going. But I kind of understand the point. Everything feels like a free hit at the minute because we're flying. Also says, will be good to see Rig and Neil in the team, especially after half a year in training with Xhaka. Again, talk about the raising of the standards. Very good point. Lord Barreld says, I think a lot has been made of this as if we have 7 to 8 key players going away. In reality, the back five hardly changes now. Our strikers aren't going. It's just going to mean utilising the squad for the midfield, which is, something we've talked about. Warren Carter makes a good point here. He says, it all depends on injuries between now and then. If we go into that with the squad we have now, we will be okay. However, especially midfield, if we lose Ilafay, Mundell or Rig, we'll be short and may struggle, which again feeds into the point we made about forward planning and maybe signing players ahead of the window opening and being ready for that, not just reacting to injuries and things. No, we are going to sign players and we're going to have them in ready to play. That will regardless of whether we have injuries or not, will make a difference. But a very good point by Warren. John O'Den Mackham says he trusts the club to have made appropriate plans and contingency arrangements. Again, feeds into what we were just saying. We'll maybe do a couple more. Isaac says, does anyone actually know when they go and will they be available for the Mags then away before Brighton? Well, Isaac, if you have listened to this podcast, you will have learned all of these things. Joe Lewin says the only concern is the replacement of Siddiqui, as we have already shown we can manage without Ronaldo. The midfield of Xhaka, Siddiqui, Lafi, Traore will need to be Xhaka, Neil, Rig, Lafi, Mundle. Presumably just means out of options there, which on paper looks okay, with Sirkin, Alessi, Mundle all coming back. We hadn't really mentioned Aji Alessi, but yeah, he's going to be available at some point, you would imagine. He still exists. He's a very good footballer when fit.
Yeah, you have to do a lot of imagining where Alessi is concerned, like imagining what he might look like on the pitch, unfortunately. Which is a shame because he is, he was class when he was fit, but I don't know how in the picture he really is he?
Yeah. I like these last couple. I'm going to end off on. Yarvin says, not worried. Looking forward to seeing how the squad copes. Think we'll be fine. And I'll end with this one from Owen James Young, who says, nah, not really. We are fucking massive.
Well said.
Agreed. Yeah, well said. So, having said what we've said over the last hour and a half or so, Johnny, and it's been a proper deep dive. So the pod is appropriately named. We are that deep into it, and I'm starting to stumble over my words. Now that we've sat here for as long as we have, we went over virtually everything that we can at this point. Where's your confidence at in terms of how we cope?
It's pretty high.
Will we be fine?
Yeah, it's pretty high, I'll be honest. Like, start of the season, I was quite worried. I'm not ashamed to say I was not at the point where I was saying when we were signing them, like, oh, why are we doing this? We shouldn't be signing this many. It's too big of a risk. Because they were all sensible signings in their own right. But you did look at it and just think, particularly the way that we thought the team was going to look from the start of the season, where you thought we were probably going to have, 4 or 5 of these players maybe starting every single game, the way that Talbi started the season as first choice, the way that obviously we had Siddiqui and Diarra playing in midfield and what have you. I was, really concerned. And before we saw how sort of good this team actually was, because you thought, if we're only on 12, 13, 10, 11, 12, 13 points or whatever by then, we're going to need those points and etc. Now I'm looking at it and thinking, well, even if the worst happens and we sort of struggle to win more than 1 or 2 games across this period where we've got these players out, it's still not a disaster. It's not the end of the world. And I think we've proven with how good that we have been in the first sort of third of this season that we already can cope with it. In a weird way, Diarra getting injured has made me much more confident about AFCON, because the start of the season, we'd have looked at it and gone, if Diarra's out, we're going to be in trouble. And then he was out, and actually we've gone from strength to strength, really. So I'm much more confident and much more relaxed. It's just, I'm more worried about what happens after. I hope nobody's injured. Because if anybody comes back with serious injuries, it'll be a very different conversation.
Well, again, and I would agree with pretty much everything you've just said there, and I would come back to this this belief that I've got that the club are very well organised and will have planned for every eventuality of AFCON, and it all. I think honestly, I think it all starts and ends with transfer business. I think we're going to go out and sign players who are ready to play, regardless of who's injured and who's away and who comes back injured perhaps and who's away longer than others. I just think the squad's going to be in a good place. I mean, as we record this, Johnny, a bunch of first teamers are playing for the under-21s against Athletic Club, and it's currently 7-1.
Yeah, they're running right.
Dennis Sirkin and Daniel have both been on the score sheet, so we're getting these lads ready. It doesn't matter what the score is, by the way. The fact is they're playing games and they're getting minutes. It's not quite Premier League football, but the point is we're getting organised with the players that we do have. The ones who are going away, we've just got to pray they come back in one piece and don't have to be away for as long as some of the other nations who might progress deep into the tournament. But if they are, we'll be prepared. And I'm just to kind of reiterate what you said, I'm very relaxed about this. I'm not stressing. I know a lot of people are. We get tagged in posts all the time. I mean, the the Q&A pods, whenever we stick the post out on X for questions, there's always 3 or 4 in there about AFCON. It's playing on people's minds. It's coming up. I totally get it. But yeah, I'm pretty relaxed as we record this. I will just say it is the 12th of November. A lot can change in a month. We might well revisit this in another Q&A pod down the line, but we'll see. But this has been Deep Dive. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, Johnny. I've enjoyed it. Been good crack.
Yeah, it's been good. I just wanted to ask one question as the final question. Do you think one of our players wins the tournament?
Ooh. What was the odds again? I think the highest on the table might have been Ivory Coast.
I think Morocco were above them.
Morocco are favourites.
But obviously that's slightly the host tax, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? It is. You know what? I look at Morocco's group. They've got a favourable group. Mali are decent. I know Zambia might have a couple of players, but they've got a pretty favourable group. The fact they're the home nation, the crowds are going to be absolutely wild if they get deep into the tournament. I do fancy Morocco. I don't know enough about the AFCON. I haven't spent an hour and a half about talking about it. I don't know like loads and loads and loads about these teams, but I always fancy a home nation to do pretty well, particularly when their fans are passionate. And the reason I referenced that Hakim Ziyech signing announcement for the team that he signed for in the Moroccan Premier League or whatever it is, because the atmosphere was unbelievable. It was like I don't know what you could. It's sort of like the ultras in Eastern Europe. Like it was that sort of thing. And if the crowds are going to be like that for the games over there, then that's going to be a massive advantage for them, having so many of their own fans. Because this is the other thing about the AFCON, by the way. The crowds aren't always brilliant because it's so difficult. And a lot of these nations are poor nations, and it's difficult. It's not like if we've seen it like when Senegal played England in England. There are an awful lot of Senegalese people live in England, so to get a lot of them to a football game is simple. Same if we played Australia, or you know what I mean. Like we've got a lot of people in this country from that nation, or Italy or Turkey or whoever else we could be playing in the country. Whereas over in Africa, it's an awful big continent. So, are there going to be many Comoros fans at that opener? It's going to be tough, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a long old way to travel as well if you're supporting a team who's probably going out in the groups and all.
That's it. Yeah, I imagine there's been a small allocation of tickets for the Comoros fans. But you never know. But no, what do you reckon? I'm probably going to be a right... Well, I'm just going to sit on the fence here, and I'm going to go with the tournament favourites, Morocco, because the bookies have got them as favourites. I can kind of understand why. I think I'm going to go with Morocco as the winners, which would mean Talby potentially picking up a medal.
Yeah, they'd probably be my pick, but my other pick would be Senegal. Assuming Diarra goes, and obviously he's with them, I could see him being one that picks up a medal, because I do think they look like like you said, they produce a lot of good players, and they've really, over a sustained period now, put some good performances together in tournaments. In this tournament, and they've been, they got to the knockouts of the last World Cup. They were in the group stage of the one before with, some of the teams that AFCON have never played in the World Cup, including some of the ones our lads play for. Burkina Faso have never been. Whereas Senegal, they're a good team. And you look at a lot of the players they've got, even if a Mane is a little bit over the hill, that's still a scary prospect. So they'd be my pick. I've got a funny little feeling that, I don't know if I'll be right about the team, but I've got a funny feeling that one of our lads does win it.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, by the way, we're kind of going on here, but the other thing I hadn't really thought about was the standard of goalkeeping. There's not many of the goalkeepers across the board playing, at a decent standard. You've obviously got Onana, who I think is absolutely awful, but as far as African goalkeepers go, he's probably one of the more high profile, isn't he? You've got Edouard Mendy at Senegal.
Yep.
I can't think of anyone else.
You've really got Yassine Bounou at Morocco, who's gone, I think it's Al Hilal now, but he was in European football for the last few years, and he had a lot of people talking about him at the last World Cup.
Right.
But it says a lot that the other name that I've gone to is a lad who plays for Al Hilal.
Hi. So if you've got a couple of top class forwards, it doesn't matter much when your goalkeeper's playing in like a farmers league and doesn't know how to jump, never mind save a ball. But we'll see. We'll see. It should be an interesting tournament. There is that added excitement of the fact that there are a lot of Sunderland players playing this tournament. I don't normally watch it. I think I probably will this time around. I'll probably keep at least a cursory eye on what's going on, and I'll want to watch our players, and I'll be kind of watching through my fingers at how they're doing. But as I was getting on to, Johnny, this has been a deep dive. Hopefully, the listeners have enjoyed it. This has been a long old pod for me and you. We don't normally stay on this long. We're into Kelvin, Andrew, Martin and Chris territory here, aren't we, nearly? Just a little bit short of their epics that they do on a Monday. But hopefully you listeners have enjoyed it. We'd love to hear your feedback. So you can catch us on all of Rotor Report's social media, the Rotor Report email, which is rotorreport@yahoo.co.uk, or you can get us on the Haway The Podcast email, which is slightly different. That is Haway The Podcast, SAFC@gmail.com. Let us know what you think about AFCON, whether you're worried or not, or whether you're like me and Johnny and fairly relaxed. You can drop us a message. And of course, there will be Q&A pods over the next couple of weeks. So if there's anything we haven't covered off that you want us to talk about, that we can bring up on one of the Q&A pods, drop us a line on social media or by email, and we'll read out your questions. So thank you very much, everybody. We'll be probably back with another one of these in the next couple of weeks. We won't probably make these a weekly thing, but if there's something we want to get our teeth stuck into that's going to take up more than just a segment on a Q&A pod, we'll certainly do it. And of course, if you have any topics you'd like to suggest, anything you think that might make a good deep dive, of course, get in touch at all those places which I said before. That just leaves me to say thank you very much, Johnny. Been a pleasure, mate.
Pleasure was all mine, pal.
Yes, and thank you to the listeners. We'll be back tomorrow with another podcast. We'll see you then.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Sports Social Podcast Network, the biggest voices in sport. Let's take a look at some of the lineup. The England pod.
If he plays regular minutes this season for Manchester City, he will re-emerge as one of the best players that we've got.
The final word.
Not sure whether stress fractures were a thing in the mid-70s in the same way that nobody ate avocados until 2005.
Let's be having you.
I love the fact that he's chosen that moment to go, do you know what? Now I'm going to do it.
All on Europe's biggest sport podcast network. Find your next favourite sport podcast. Search Sports Social Podcast Network and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Verified comparison at content.sport-social.co.uk/comparison.